Welcome to the War Academy channel. Today, we have a program in which we are going to analyze the last months of the war in Europe, in which we will see the possibility that the Soviets had to take Berlin during the same month of February 1945, and the reasons why they finally did not. They began the offensive until April. As is evident, this action could have put an end to the war 2 months earlier, but as we are going to see, and as has happened in many other wars, it was decided to extend it a little longer in order to consolidate better political positions once it was over. To begin the program, we have to go back to the end of 1944. During the month of December, the German positions on the Eastern Front found themselves with a defensive line that was smaller than ever, in the vicinity of the Vistula River. This situation, added to the major offensives that the Soviet Union had previously launched against Army Group North and Center, and also in the southern zone in Romania, made the Germans think that the Soviets were worn out and that they were going to need time to go back on the offensive. This gave them a false sense of momentary security, which made them reluctant to accept a new offensive on Poland and East Prussia until at least the spring of 1945. Despite the continuous attacks that the Soviets were carrying out in Hungary, whose capital was surrounded by the end of December 1944, the Germans dared to concentrate their best troops far from there. The reason was that they wanted to carry out one last large-scale attack on the Western Front, known as the Ardennes Offensive. This operation took by total surprise the Allies, who did not believe that at that time Germany could still launch attacks of such magnitude. Although the Germans ultimately failed to meet their stated objectives, the Western Allies asked Stalin to speed up his next attack on the Vistula. Although this new Soviet offensive was scheduled for the end of January 1945, due to these demands it had to be brought forward, and it was launched on the 12th of that month. This operation, known as the Vistula Oder Offensive, completely shut out the German armies defending the area, and after a spectacular advance of more than 400 kilometers in just over 2 weeks, the Soviets positioned themselves on the Oder River, just a few kilometers from Berlin. This frantic penetration exceeded all the forecasts that the Soviets had, as they did not expect the German forces to crumble in the way they did. Although the Soviets had made their advance right through the center, the remaining German armies had been pushed back and hemmed in on the northern and southern flanks. As we saw in the program we did on Himmler and his role as Commander-in-Chief of the Vistula Army Group, it was precisely at this moment that he was put in charge of resolving the situation, and this only aggravated the problems that the Germans already had. On the basis of this weakness, and the few German forces that had quickly been placed in the defense of the Oder River, Zhukov sent a message to Stalin on February 10 indicating his intentions to rush on Berlin as soon as possible. This plan was completed on February 13 and contemplated an offensive on Berlin from the 19th, with the aim of surrounding the German capital by the end of that month. The armies commanded by both Zhukov and Carinhall would participate in it. Faced with this plan, Stalin initially said yes, but changed his mind a little later. Although it is true that the vanguard of the Red Army with which the attack had to be carried out had been worn out after the swift offensive and needed a few weeks to recover, without a doubt they could have made a last final effort on Berlin. Let us remember that this Oder-Vistula offensive caught the Germans by surprise, and not even in their worst thoughts had they imagined that the Red Army could be located 60 kilometers from Berlin before the end of January. This means that at that time the city was totally unprotected and without any type of defensive preparation, so no matter how weakened Zhukov's first Belarusian front might be, with minimal reinforcements, they should be able to conclude the operation. Finally, Stalin gave orders that the offensive on Berlin be cancelled, and instead the consolidation of the flanks that were still resisting was fixed. In addition to these operations to clear the flanks and other pockets of German troops, orders were also given to start new offensives in Hungary. The official reasons given by the Soviet High Command were as follows. Firstly, the remaining German forces in Pomerania were considered to be a serious threat to Zhukov's flank if this offensive were launched, so he had to be eliminated. Second, the German forces defending the Oder bank were assessed to be strong enough to cripple the accelerating Soviet offensive. Thirdly, it was indicated that the troops that were going to participate in this offensive were short of supplies, and their supply lines were overextended due to the rapid advance made, so they needed more time to recover. And finally, it was established that finishing off the remaining pockets of resistance in the rear, as well as on the flanks, was the new priority. These points that were fixed in February 1945 were the ones that were accepted without any type of opposition both by the military and historians of the moment, as well as by later ones. However, the debate as to whether or not this operation would have been viable came to the fore in the 1960s, when Marshal Chuikov, the hero of Stalingrad, published in his book that Berlin could have been taken in February 1945 and thus prevented 2 more months of war in Europe, with all the deaths that this continued to cause. Quickly, other marshals like Zhukov, who also participated in the offensive, published other articles in which they refuted this theory and justified what was done. This matter provoked a great controversy in his country, and finally Chuikov's reflections were censored both in his book and in any article. Since then, the issue remained unchallenged until long after the fall of the Soviet Union. More recent studies have determined that the real reason Stalin stopped this offensive on Berlin in February was more political than military. And it is that, while the last attacks of the Vistula Oder offensive were taking place, the Yalta Conference was taking place in which the Allies finished agreeing on the future distribution of Europe. In this meeting the division of Germany was fixed, as well as the division of Berlin into different zones of control by each of the powers. This ensured Soviet influence in the area, so there was no rush to arrive sooner or later. However, with regard to Austria there was a certain gap, because although the distribution of German territory was fixed in Yalta, Austria was not originally German territory, so it was left out of the pact. It was then that Stalin ordered new offensives in the area, which would lead him to the conquest of the entire Danube basin, as well as the city of Vienna. In this way he wanted to exert the greatest possible influence in the area to consolidate these territories for the USSR once the war was over. So, once it was over, Stalin kept the Baltic region, some parts of Karelia, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, a third of the original German territory, and half of Austria along with its capital Vienna. On the other hand, and as we mentioned at the beginning, prolonging a war that has already been won a little longer is a technique widely used by all countries, in order to justify harsh actions against the enemy itself, or against the conquered population, which would be more difficult to commit in peacetime. And what do you think? Do you think that the Soviets could have taken Berlin in February 1945? Or, on the contrary, do you think that the decision made was the correct one given the circumstances? I await your answers in the comment box. If you want to continue analyzing the Battle of Berlin, I leave you in the description other programs that we have made on the subject. We say goodbye here. Many thanks to everyone, especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and see you in the next one. See you soon.